Your sister is very upset right now, my mother said, her voice sounding irritated over the phone. This is not the time to be dramatic. I stared at the hospital ceiling while nurses adjusted the monitors beside my bed. I'm being taken into surgery in 10 minutes, I said quietly. She's crying because you criticized her living room, Mom replied. Can this wait? Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa. The anesthesiologist was preparing the IV beside me when I began to realize something unusual. My mother wasn't coming. I just wanted to hear your voice before they start, I said. Mom sighed heavily. You're an adult. You'll be fine. I have to deal with your sister right now. The call ended. The nurse noticed my expression. Family on the way? She asked gently. No, I answered. Because in that moment, I understood something important. My surgery was serious, yet my sister's disagreement about home decor seemed to carry more weight on the family priority list. I didn't cry. I didn't ask anyone to come. Instead, I picked up my phone and called someone else. My surgery begins in a few minutes, I told my lawyer calmly. If I wake up, meet me in the ICU tomorrow. There was a short pause. Understood, he replied. That was the moment everything quietly shifted. The surgery lasted 6 hours. I remember very little of it, only the cold lights in the operating room and the anesthesiologist asking me to breathe slowly while the medication moved through the IV. When I woke up, everything felt distant. Machines hummed around my bed, and the steady rhythm of monitors filled the ICU. A nurse noticed my eyes open. Welcome back, Marissa, she said softly. Did it work? I whispered. It went very well. Relief should have been the strongest emotion in that moment. Instead, what I felt most was clarity. My phone rested on the small tray beside the bed. There were no missed calls and no messages. Not from my mother, not from my father, and not even from my sister. The nurse adjusted my IV and smiled kindly. Family usually comes later in the day, she said. Sometimes they just need time. I didn't correct her. Instead, I picked up my phone and typed one message to my lawyer. I'm awake. The reply came almost instantly. I'm on my way to the hospital. I set the phone down and looked back at the ceiling. My mother still hadn't called, but something else had already started. The legal paperwork we discussed before surgery had a clear purpose: to ensure that my life decisions would no longer be controlled by people who ignored them. My lawyer arrived that afternoon, not loudly and not with any drama, just a quiet knock on the ICU door and a leather folder under his arm. How are you feeling? He asked. Sore, I admitted. That's expected. He pulled a chair beside my bed and opened the folder. I brought the documents you requested. 3 months earlier, when my health first began to decline, I had prepared something most people my age prefer not to think about: power of attorney, medical authority, and financial control. Until that morning, my mother had been listed as my emergency decision maker. Not because she had earned that role, but because I assumed she would be there when it mattered. My lawyer placed the papers onto the tray table. Are you certain about these changes? He asked quietly. Yes. He carefully handed me the pen so I wouldn't strain the IV line in my arm. One signature removed my mother's authority over my medical care. Another removed her access to my accounts. The third transferred everything to the only person who had shown up that day. Not family, my lawyer. Just as I finished signing, my phone buzzed. Mom, I answered. Why didn't you tell me the surgery was today? She demanded. I looked at the signed paperwork beside me. I did. You mentioned something earlier, my mother replied quickly, but your sister was very upset. I leaned slightly against the hospital pillows, careful not to disturb the stitches across my chest. I called you from the operating room, I said calmly. Well, I thought you were exaggerating, she replied. Exaggerating? The words settled quietly between us. When are you being discharged? She asked. Not for a few days. Oh, she said, your sister and I might come by later this week. Might? I glanced at the folder still open on the tray beside me. You don't need to, I replied. What is that supposed to mean? She asked sharply. It means I've already handled everything. What? Everything, my medical decisions. There was a brief pause. You're being dramatic again, she said. I'm being practical. My lawyer quietly gathered the signed papers while I spoke. What practical decision? She asked. The one where you are no longer responsible for my care. Silence filled the line. What are you talking about? I changed my medical authority this afternoon, I said calmly. You can't just remove your own mother. I watched my lawyer slide the documents back into his folder. Yes, I replied softly, I can. What did you do? My mother snapped. Her voice was louder now, the tone she used when she expected the entire room to adjust to her frustration. I reassigned medical authority, I said calmly. You had no right to do that. I almost smiled. I actually had every right. My lawyer stood quietly near the window, giving me space while still listening carefully. You're punishing me, my mom said. No, I replied. I'm protecting myself. From what? She demanded. I wasn't even there yet. Exactly. I thought about the operating room doors closing while she was discussing throw pillows with my sister. You didn't answer when I called, I said. I was dealing with your sister, she insisted. You know how emotional she gets. I let the sentence sit for a moment. Mom, I said slowly, I was about to go under anesthesia. You survived, she replied quickly. The room became very quiet. My lawyer looked up from his folder, not surprised, simply observing. I did, I agreed, and that gave me time to think. Think about what? She asked. About who actually shows up when it matters. Another pause followed. Fine, she said sharply. When can we visit? I looked at the heart monitor beside my bed. You can't. What do you mean we can't? I said calmly, you're no longer listed as the family contact. You can't remove your own mother, she said again, though the certainty in her voice had weakened. I already did. My lawyer quietly slid a second document across the tray. This confirms the hospital records update, he said. I signed it slowly. My mother was still speaking. You're being irrational. Hospitals always contact family. This one won't, I replied. Why? Because you're no longer listed. Silence followed. Not the frustrated silence from earlier, but a confused one. What exactly did you do? She finally asked. I assigned medical authority to someone who answers the phone. My lawyer didn't react, though I noticed him glance briefly toward the window. You chose a stranger over your own mother, she said sharply. He's not a stranger, I replied. He's reliable. That seemed to irritate her even more. This is ridiculous. When I arrive, we'll fix it. You can come to the hospital, I said calmly, but you'll check in like any other visitor. What does that mean? It means you won't be making decisions. The heart monitor beside my bed continued its steady rhythm. You're overreacting, she said again. I looked down at the bandage across my chest. No, I replied quietly. I'm reorganizing. My mother arrived the next afternoon. Not quietly, she walked into the ICU waiting area already irritated, as if the hospital itself had caused her inconvenience. The nurse stopped her at the desk. Are you listed as the family contact for Marissa Collins? She asked. Yes, I'm her mother. The nurse checked the screen. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're listed as a visitor. My mother blinked. That's incorrect. It was updated yesterday. I watched the entire conversation through the small glass panel beside my room door. My lawyer stood nearby with his arms folded. She's not authorized for medical decisions, the nurse continued politely. My mother's voice sharpened. I am her mother. Yes, ma'am, the nurse replied calmly, but not changing her response. Her medical proxy. The words carried more weight than I expected. Mom turned and finally noticed me watching from inside the room. Her expression shifted immediately. First surprise, then irritation, and finally disbelief. She stepped inside. What did you do? She demanded. I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't even straighten my posture. I made sure the person responsible for my life answers when I call. Her eyes briefly moved toward my lawyer. You replaced me with him? I nodded once. Yes? For the first time in my life, she looked as if she had lost control of the situation. She stood beside the hospital bed for a moment, trying to regain the authority she had always carried. You're being dramatic, my mother said finally. I had almost expected that response. I was about to go into surgery, I replied quietly. I called you from the operating room. You made it sound like an emergency. It was. She folded her arms. Your sister was in tears. I looked at her carefully. About a sofa? That's not the point. But it finally was. The nurse stepped in briefly to check my monitor, then left again, closing the door quietly behind her. My mother looked around the ICU room, uneasy in a place where she hadn't expected to feel powerless. You should have waited for me, she said. I did. Silence followed. Your lawyer shouldn't be making family decisions, she added. He isn't, I said calmly. I am. The difference seemed to settle in slowly. Because this wasn't punishment, it was structure. You'll regret pushing family away, she warned. I looked down at the faint scar beneath the bandage across my chest. No, I replied. I'll regret ignoring reality. My heart monitor continued its steady rhythm beside the bed, stronger than her authority and stronger than her absence.